A police dog clawed at the metal cage of a moving truck, howling in a way his handler had never heard before. He was supposed to be miles away on a mission, but back at the house, behind a locked bedroom door, a 5-year-old boy was being tortured by the very woman promised to protect him. No one saw the bruises, no one heard the cries, but the dog knew. He remembered the scent of fear. What happened when the officer finally turned back will make you cry and believe in the unbreakable bond between a father, his son, and their dog. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. And if you believe that God sends us warning signs to save the ones we love, hit that subscribe button, because this story, this one, might just restore your faith and instincts that go beyond human understanding. The morning sun draped itself over the historic streets of Charleston, South Carolina, like a warm golden blanket. It was one of those perfect late autumn days where the air hovered comfortably around 68J, crisp enough to wake you up, but warm enough to promise a beautiful afternoon. The Spanish moss hanging from the ancient cypress trees swayed gently in the breeze, casting dancing shadows on the manicured lawns of the suburbs. To any passerby, the two-story house with the white picket fence and the blooming scarlet azaleas looked like a postcard of the American dream. It was sturdy, well-maintained, and bathed in the innocent light of a Tuesday morning. But inside, the air was heavy, thick with things unsaid and terrors unseen. Inside the hallway, Sergeant Liam Pierce adjusted the collar of his uniform. Liam was a man who took up space. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried the kind of quiet, rugged strength that came from years on the K-9 unit. His face was weathered by the sun, lines of laughter and worry etched around his eyes. But today, his expression was focused on the task ahead. He had just received orders for a short-term assignment in the neighboring county, a 2-day joint training operation that he couldn't turn down. It was a career opportunity, a chance to provide better for his family. "Do you have everything, honey?" The voice belonged to Bethany, Liam's wife of 2 years. She glided down the stairs, looking effortless in a silk floral blouse and tailored trousers. Bethany was beautiful in a sharp, almost porcelain way. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a flawless chignon, not a strand out of place, and her smile was the kind that could light up a room or hide a multitude of sins. She held out a thermos of black coffee, her nails perfectly manicured, crimson like the azaleas outside. "Thanks, babe," Liam said, taking the coffee and leaning down to kiss her cheek. He smelled her perfume, expensive and sweet, a scent that usually comforted him. "I hate leaving you two alone, even if it's just for 48 hours. "Oh, stop worrying," Bethany soothed, her hand brushing lint off his badge. "We will be fine. Finn and I have plenty of bonding activities planned, don't we, Finn?" At the mention of his name, a small figure shifted in the shadows of the living room doorway. Finn was 5 years old, but he looked smaller, fragile, like a bird that had fallen from the nest too soon. He had his father's dark hair, but none of his size. His large brown eyes were always wide, darting around as if expecting a blow to come from the ether. He was wearing a long-sleeved shirt despite the pleasant weather, and his hands were clutching the hem of it so tightly his knuckles were white. Liam sighed, his heart pinching at the sight of his son. He attributed Finn's skittishness to the loss of his biological mother 3 years ago, a wound Liam tried desperately to heal with love and stability. He didn't see the flinch when Bethany took a step towards the boy. He didn't see the way Finn's breath hitched. Liam walked over and knelt on one knee, bringing himself down to Finn's eye level. The floorboards creaked under his heavy boots. "Come here, buddy," Liam said softly, opening his arms. Finn hesitated. His eyes flickered to his father, filled with a desperate, silent plea. He wanted to run into those strong arms. He wanted to bury his face in the rough fabric of the uniform that smelled like safety and tell him everything. He wanted to scream that the house wasn't safe, that the perfume smelled like poison, that the azaleas outside hid thorns that scratched deep. But then Finn looked up just over his father's shoulder. Bethany was standing there. Her hands were clasped in front of her in a pose of patient adoration. Her mouth was curved into a loving smile for Liam's benefit, but her eyes were 2 chips of blue ice. She didn't blink. She just stared at Finn. And then with terrifying subtlety, the corner of her lip twitched upward in a silent snarl. It was a look that promised consequences. It was a look that reminded Finn of the dark closet, the hunger and the pain. The words died in Finn's throat. The scream turned into a lump of lead in his stomach. The boy lowered his head, defeating the urge to cry out, and stepped forward slowly, letting his father wrap him in a hug. "I'm going to miss you, champ," Liam whispered, squeezing him tight. "I'm going on a mission, okay? Just for 2 days. You stay here and be a big boy for Bethany." Finn nodded against his father's chest, his body stiff. Liam pulled back and smiled, unaware of the trembling beneath his hands. "Tell you what, when I get back, we're going to the toy store. I'm going to buy you that big race car set we saw in the window. The one with the loop-loop. How does that sound?" Finn managed a weak nod. He tried to force a smile, but it looked more like a grimace. "Okay, Daddy," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Please come back soon." "Before you know it," Liam promised. He stood up, his knees cracking slightly, and ruffled Finn's hair. "Be good." Liam turned to Bethany, giving her one last lingering kiss. "Call me if you need anything. Anything at all." "Go save the world, Sergeant," Bethany said playfully, pushing him toward the door. "We'll be right here waiting." Liam grabbed his duffel bag and headed out the front door, stepping into the brilliant sunshine. The contrast between the bright, cheerful world outside and the heavy dread inside the boy's heart was sickening. Waiting by the specialized K-9 unit truck in the driveway was Atlas. Atlas was a 4-year-old German shepherd, a magnificent creature of black and tan fur, muscle, and intelligence. He was Liam's partner, his shadow, and in many ways the soul of the family. Atlas was usually eager to work, his ears perked up at the jingle of keys, ready to leap into his crate. But today, Atlas was different. As Liam approached the truck, he whistled for the dog. "Load up, Atlas. Let's go, boy." Atlas didn't move toward the open crate door. Instead, the great dog planted his feet firmly on the driveway pavement. He let out a low, vibrating whine that started deep in his chest. His ears were pinned back against his skull, and his dark, soulful eyes were fixed not on Liam, but on the living room window where Finn was standing. "Atlas, heel," Liam commanded, his voice firm but confused. The dog broke command. He trotted over to Liam and shoved his wet nose hard against Liam's thigh, nearly knocking the duffel bag out of his hand. It was a forceful, desperate nudge. Atlas looked up at Liam, let out a sharp bark, and then turned his head back to the house, letting out a long, mournful howl that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. Liam paused, looking down at his partner. He saw the anxiety in the dog's posture, the tucked tail, the furrowed brow. Atlas paced in a tight circle between Liam and the front door, as if trying to build a physical barrier. "What's got into you?" Liam muttered, reaching down to scratch Atlas behind the ears. "You act like I'm leaving you behind forever." "We're just going to the next county, buddy. You're coming with me." Liam looked back at the house. He saw Finn's small hand pressed against the glass. He saw Bethany standing behind him, waving. To Liam, it looked like a picture-perfect goodbye. He assumed Atlas was just picking up on the stress of the departure. Or maybe he smelled a squirrel he couldn't chase. "Come on, stop being a baby," Liam said, chuckling softly as he grabbed Atlas's collar. He guided the reluctant animal toward the truck. Atlas resisted for a moment, his claws scraping against the concrete, digging in as if to say, "No, you don't understand. We can't leave him." But Liam was stronger. He lifted the dog's front paws, and with a resigned huff, Atlas finally hopped into his crate. As Liam closed the metal door, Atlas let out one last yelp, a sound that was less like a bark and more like a cry for help. Liam climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway. He checked his rearview mirror. He saw his beautiful wife and his safe home getting smaller and smaller. He turned on the radio to a country station, humming along, completely blind to the fact, or that he was driving away from a crime scene in the making. As the police truck turned the corner and vanished from sight, the atmosphere on the front porch shifted instantly. It was as if the sun had suddenly gone behind a cloud, though the sky remained clear. Bethany stood by the window for a full minute, her hand raised in a wave until the rumble of the engine faded into the distance. Slowly, mechanically, she lowered her hand. The warmth drained from her face. Her shoulders, previously relaxed and feminine, squared up. The loving wife dissolved, and the tyrant emerged. She turned away from the window and looked down at Finn. Finn was still staring at the east spot where his father's truck had been. He felt a cold hand touch his shoulder. It wasn't a caress, it was a grip, firm and possessive, her manicured nails digging into the soft fabric of his shirt, finding the skin beneath. Bethany walked to the front door and closed it. She didn't slam it with rage. She closed it with a deliberate, heavy thud that sounded like the lid of a coffin sealing shut. She turned the deadbolt. Click. The house was silent. The hum of the refrigerator seemed deafening. Bethany leaned down, her face inches from Finn's. Her breath smelled of mint and coffee, a smell that made Finn's stomach turn. Her eyes were empty of humanity. "What are you looking at?" she whispered. Her voice was no longer melodic. It was a hiss like steam escaping a pipe. Finn trembled, his lower lip quivering. "Nothing, Mommy Bethany. Don't call me that," she snapped, her voice rising just enough to cut and wipe that pathetic look off your face. "You think because he's gone, you can relax? You think you can be lazy?" She stood up to her full height, towering over him like a statue of judgment. She pointed a long, crimson-tipped finger toward the kitchen. "The kitchen floor is filthy. I saw a speck of dust on it this morning. You embarrassed me, and you made me look like I don't keep a clean house." I, I didn't mean to," Finn stammered, tears welling up in his large brown eyes. "Words don't clean floors," Bethany said coldly. "Get in there on your hands and knees. I want it spotless. And don't you dare think about crying. Your father isn't coming back to save you." She leaned in one last time, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "He left you, Finn. He chose to leave. Now move." Finn scrambled toward the kitchen, his socks slipping on the hardwood, desperate to escape the predator in the hallway. As he grabbed the rag from under the sink, he could hear Bethany humming a happy tune as she walked up the stairs, the sound chilling him to the bone. The house settled into a silence that was heavy and suffocating. The kind of silence that usually belongs to museums or funeral parlors, not a home where a 5-year-old boy lived. Outside, the world continued to spin. The mail carrier whistled a tune 2 streets over, and a neighbor's lawnmower buzzed like a distant angry bee. But inside, time seemed to have frozen, suspended in a thick gel of anxiety. Bethany did not yell. That was the most terrifying thing about her. Yelling implied a loss of control, and Bethany never lost control. She moved through the kitchen with the grace of a dancer and the precision of a surgeon. She opened the top drawer of the antique oak sideboard in the dining room. It slid open with a smooth, well-oiled whisper. From the darkness of the drawer, she retrieved it. It was not a belt, nor a switch from the willow tree outside. It was a carpenter's ruler, a vintage piece made of dense, polished hickory wood with brass hinges. It was heavy, rigid, and unyielding. Bethany preferred it because of its efficiency. It didn't break the skin. It didn't draw blood that would stain clothes or require bandages that might raise questions at preschool. Instead, it left welts, long raised, angry red ridges that throbbed with a burning heat for hours, hidden perfectly beneath long sleeves and trousers. She called it the teacher. "Lunchtime, Finn," Bethany called out. Her voice was light, almost musical, singing the words as if she were calling a puppy. Finn was still on his knees in the kitchen, scrubbing a spot on the floor that had been clean for 10 minutes. At the sound of her voice, his stomach gave a treacherous growl. He hadn't had breakfast. The smell of the bacon Liam had eaten earlier still lingered in the air, a cruel ghost of a meal he hadn't touched. "Coming, Ma. Mommy, Bethany." Finn corrected himself quickly, scrambling to his feet. He washed his hands at the sink, the water cold against his raw skin, and hurried to the dining table. A single sandwich sat on a white plate. It was perfectly square, the crusts cut off. Next to it was a tall glass of milk filled to the very brim. "Sit," Bethany commanded, taking her place at the head of the table. She placed the wooden ruler next to her teacup. Clack! The sound of wood hitting wood made Finn flinch. "Eat. Your father would be upset if he knew you were skipping meals." Finn climbed onto the chair. He was so hungry his hands were shaking. He picked up the sandwich and took a small bite, chewing quickly, his eyes fixed on the brass hinge of the ruler. He swallowed the dry bread with difficulty. He needed a drink. He reached for the heavy glass of milk. His fingers, small and trembling from low blood sugar and high fear, struggled to grip the condensation-slicked glass. He lifted it toward his mouth. Clink. The glass clipped to the edge of the plate as he set it down. A single solitary drop of white milk sloshed over the rim. It fell in slow motion, hitting the polished mahogany table. It didn't make a sound, but to Finn, it might as well have been a bomb going off. The white droplet sat there, stark and offensive, against the dark wood. Finn stopped breathing. He looked up at Bethany. Bethany stared at the drop of milk. She took a sip of her tea, set the cup down, and picked up the ruler. She tapped it rhythmically against her palm. Tap, tap, tap. Clumsy, she whispered. Careless. She stood up. Finn squeezed his eyes shut, bracing himself. But before the first blow could fall, a cheerful digital chirping sound erupted from the kitchen counter. It was the ringtone assigned to Liam. The transformation was instantaneous and horrifying to witness. The cold reptilian mask vanished. Bethany's shoulders dropped. Her eyes widened into an expression of warmth, and the smile bloomed on her face. She smoothed her hair and grabbed her smartphone, propping it up against a fruit bowl. Finn, smile, she hissed, the venom in her voice at odds with the brightness on her face. Now she accepted the FaceTime call. The screen lit up, and there was Liam sitting in the cab of his truck, the sunlight casting shadows over his rugged face. He looked tired but happy. Hey, beautiful, Liam's voice boomed through the speaker, tinny but full of love. Just crossed the county line. Wanted to check in on my two favorite people. Bethany leaned into the frame, angling the camera so that it showed her face and Finn sitting at the table, but carefully cropping out the wooden ruler resting near her hand. Hi, honey. We were just having a lovely lunch, Bethany cooed. She reached out and stroked Finn's hair. Her fingers felt like claws to him, but on the screen it looked like a mother's loving touch. Look who's eating all his sandwich. Hey, big guy. Liam waved. You being good for Bethany? Finn looked at the phone. He saw his father's eyes full of trust. He wanted to scream. He wanted to flip the table over. He wanted to show Liam the ruler. But Bethany's other hand, hidden under the table, was pinching his thigh. A sharp, twisting pinch that promised agony if he stepped out of line. Yes, Daddy? Finn squeaked. We're having so much fun, aren't we, Finn? Bethany prompted, her eyes boring into him. Tell Daddy how much you love our time together. Finn swallowed the lump in his throat. He felt the phantom sting of the ruler already. He knew the script. I love Mommy Bethany, Finn recited, his voice trembling. We are having fun on the screen. Liam's brow furrowed slightly. He leaned closer to his phone. Finn, you okay, buddy? You sound a little wobbly. You've got tears in your eyes. Panic flared in Bethany's chest, but she didn't show it. She let out a soft, sympathetic laugh. Oh, Liam, you won't believe it, she said, leaning her cheek against Finn's head. We were just watching The Lion King before lunch. You know the part where Mufasa dies? He's been heartbroken for the last 20 minutes. Such a sensitive soul. Just like his daddy, Liam's face softened instantly. The suspicion evaporated, replaced by fatherly affection. Finn, it's just a movie, son. Mufasa lives on in the stars, remember? Finn couldn't speak. He just nodded, a fresh tear leaking out and rolling down his cheek. To Liam, it confirmed the lie. Tomorrow it was fuel. I have to get back to the briefing, babe, Liam said, checking his watch. I love you both, Finn. Finish that milk. Grow big and strong. We love you too. Stay safe. Bethany blew a kiss at the camera. She tapped the red button. The screen went black. The silence rushed back into the room, louder than before. Bethany put the phone down gently. She looked at Finn. The smile slid off her face like melting wax. She didn't yell. She didn't explain. She simply picked up the carpenter's ruler. She pointed toward the living room, specifically at the beige sofa. Position, she said. One word. Finn slid off his chair. His legs felt like jelly. He walked to the sofa and climbed up, lying face down, burying his face in the decorative pillow. He grabbed the fabric in his teeth. He knew the rule. Silence is golden. If he screamed, the count restarted. If he cried too loud, she would add 5 more. Bethany walked over. She took her time. She adjusted his shirt, smoothing out the wrinkles on his back as if she were ironing a shirt, not preparing to bruise the skin beneath it. You spilled milk, she stated calmly, standing over him. and you made me lie to your father. Lying is a sin, Finn. She raised the hickory ruler high. Wish crack. The sound was sharp like a gunshot in the quiet house. The wood bit into the tender flesh of his thigh. Finn's body arched like a bow. A silent scream exploded in his throat, but he bit down on the pillow until his jaw ached. He squeezed his eyes shut, seeing stars behind his eyelids. Wish! Crack! The second blow landed just above the first on his buttocks. A line of fire seared across his skin. One, Bethany counted softly. She wasn't counting the blows. She was counting the minutes she intended to continue. Wish! Crack! Outside, the sun continued to shine on the azaleas. Inside, under the sunny roof, a little boy learned that monsters didn't live under the bed. They sat at the dinner table. They smelled like expensive perfume, and they held wooden rulers that measured pain instead of inches. Finn lay there trembling, tears soaking into the expensive fabric of the pillow, praying for the only thing he had left to hope for, that one day the sun would shine on the truth. The next morning dawned with a deceptive brilliance. It was Wednesday and Charleston was showing off. The sky was a piercing, cloudless azure, the kind that usually heralded a day of picnics and park visits. The temperature hovered pleasantly around 68 OHJ, the air filled with the scent of blooming jasmine and the earthy dampness of the manicured lawns drying in the sun. It was beautiful. It was perfect. And to Finn, observing it from the sliver of window in the living room, it looked like a different planet. Inside the house, the air conditioning was set to a chill, but the atmosphere was stifling. Finn moved stiffly. Every step sent a jolt of pain radiating from his thigh and lower back, reminders of the hickory ruler's lesson from the day before. He was wearing his pajamas, sitting quietly on the edge of the sofa, his hands folded in his lap. He had learned quickly that stillness was his best defense. If he was still, he was invisible. If he was invisible, he was safe. Bethany was in the kitchen humming. She was making herself an avocado toast, the knife slicing through the green flesh with satisfying precision. She seemed to have forgotten the violence of the previous afternoon, or perhaps for her it was simply a completed task like doing the laundry. Then the sound of tires crunching on gravel shattered the morning calm. It wasn't the slow, rhythmic roll of the mail truck. It was the heavy, authoritative grind of a large vehicle braking hard. Bethany froze. The knife hovered in midair. She turned her head, her eyes narrowing as she looked out the front window. A familiar black and tan K-9 unit truck was pulling into the driveway. Liam, she whispered, the name hissing through her teeth. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in her chest. He wasn't supposed to be back. He was supposed to be 2 counties over, deep in a tactical training exercise. Why was he here? Had someone called him? Had the neighbors heard something? She looked at Finn. He was wearing a thin t-shirt. The bruises from yesterday, the long red welts on his arms where he had instinctively raised them to block a blow, were visible. Faint, but visible to a trained eye, and Liam was a detective at heart. He noticed details. Up, Bethany barked, dropping the knife. It clattered loudly onto the counter. Get up now! Finn flinched, scrambling off the sofa. Daddy, he whispered, hope flaring in his chest so hot it hurt. Don't you dare, Bethany snapped, rushing toward him. She grabbed his arm, ignoring his WS of pain, and dragged him toward the hall closet. He forgot something. That's all. If you say a word, if you make one sound about what happened, I will put you in the dark room for a week. Do you understand? Finn nodded frantically, the hope dying as quickly as it had been born. Bethany tore through the coats in the closet. It was a warm southern morning, but she bypassed the windbreakers and the light jackets. She grabbed a thick, oversized fleece hoodie, winter garment, dark navy blue with a heavy hood. Put this on, she ordered, shoving it over his head. Finn struggled, his movement slowed due to the soreness in his shoulders. Bethany didn't wait. She yanked the garment down, forcing his arms through the sleeves roughly. The thick fabric covered everything. The bruises on his arms, the welts on his back, the trembling of his thin frame. She pulled the hood up over his head, shadowing his face. You're sick, she instructed, her voice dropping to a frantic whisper as footsteps pounded up the porch stairs. You have the chills. You're freezing. Keep your mouth shut and look miserable. That shouldn't be hard for you, Goo. The front door unlocked. Bethany spun around, her face transforming instantly. The snarl vanished, replaced by a look of flustered concern. She smoothed her hair and stepped into the entryway just as the door swung open. But it wasn't Liam who entered first. It was Atlas. The German shepherd barreled into the house like a storm cloud. He didn't trot. He surged, the leash trailing loose behind him as if Liam had dropped it in his haste. Usually Atlas would greet Bethany with a polite wag or head straight for his water bowl. Today he ignored her completely. The dog's nose was working overtime, nostrils flaring, taking in the complex tapestry of scents in the house. He smelled the avocado. He smelled the lemon floor cleaner. But underneath that, overpowering it all, was the sharp, metallic tang of distress. He smelled cortisol, the stress hormone that poured off Finn in waves. And beneath the fabric of the heavy hoodie, his sensitive nose picked up the faint, orange-rich scent of blood that had pulled under bruised skin. Atlas let out a low guttural growl that vibrated through the floorboards. He made a beeline for Finn, who was standing by the closet, looking like a small ghost in the oversized blue hoodie. Bethany's heart hammered against her ribs. She saw the dog's focus. She saw the hackles rising on Atlas's back. He knew. Animals always knew. Just as Atlas reached Finn, lowering his head to sniff aggressively at the boy's legs, Bethany stepped in with a motion swift and subtle, hidden by the angle of the doorframe and her own body. She drove the toe of her slipper hard into the dog's ribs. It wasn't a playful nudge. It was a kick meant to hurt. Atlas yelped, startled more than injured, and skittered sideways, his claws scrabbling on the hardwood. "Liam!" Bethany shouted, her voice pitched high with manufactured worry. "Grab the dog. He's being too rough." Liam stepped into the hallway, looking breathless and harried. He wasn't wearing his full tactical gear, just his uniform trousers and a t-shirt, sweat already beading on his forehead. "Sorry, sorry." Liam grabbed Atlas's collar, pulling the confused and agitated dog back. "I forgot the case file for the joint operation. Left it right on the kitchen counter like an idiot. I've got to grab it and go. I'm already 20 minutes behind." He looked down at Atlas, who was still fixated on Finn, whining with a high-pitched, desperate sound. "Atlas, heel. What is wrong with you lately?" Liam tied the leash to the banister, securing the dog, then looked up. His eyes landed on his son. Finn stood by the wall, swamped in the thick navy hoodie, his hands hidden in the front pocket. The hood pulled low. He was shaking, visibly, violently shaking. Liam's rush evaporated. The father in him overtook the officer. "Finn." Liam walked over, crouching down. "Buddy, why are you wearing that? It's 70J outside." Finn looked at his father. His eyes were glassy with unshed tears in the overwhelming heat of the fleece. He wanted to speak. He wanted to pull up his sleeve and show the purple marks. He wanted to point at the ruler hidden in the drawer. But Bethany was standing right behind Liam. She wasn't looking at Finn. She was looking at Liam's back, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. But Finn saw her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her eyes were dead. One finger was tapped against her lips. Silence. "He woke up like this, Liam," Bethany said, her voice dripping with maternal anxiety. "I think it's the flu. He's been shivering uncontrollably for the last hour. He said he was freezing, so I bundled him up." Liam looked from Bethany to Finn. "The flu? He was fine yesterday. It came on fast." Bethany lied smoothly. "You know how kids are. One minute they're playing, the next they're crashing." Liam reached out. "Hey, let me see." He placed his large, calloused hand on Finn's forehead. The moment of contact was electric. Liam expected to feel cool skin or maybe a mild warmth. What he felt shocked him. Finn was burning up, beneath the thick synthetic fleece of the hoodie, trapped in a house with the air conditioning off in that room, and fueled by the adrenaline of sheer terror. Finn's body temperature had skyrocketed. He was sweating profusely. His hair was plastered to his skull, damp and hot. His skin radiated a heat that felt exactly like a raging fever. To Liam, it was undeniable medical proof. "Oh my God," Liam breathed, pulling his hand back and then cupping Finn's cheek. "He's burning up, Bethany. He's soaking wet." "I know," Bethany said, stepping closer and wrapping her arms around her waist, playing the helpless, worried mother. "I gave him some Tylenol about 20 minutes ago." I was just about to make him some soup. I didn't want to worry you while you were driving. Liam looked at his son with profound guilt. Here he was, running off to play hero in the next county, while his little boy was sick and miserable at home. I should stay, Liam muttered, looking at his watch. I can call the captain. No, Bethany said quickly. Too quickly. She softened her tone instantly. No, Liam, you can't. You've been planning this training for months. It's important for your promotion. I've got this. It's just a fever. I'll keep him hydrated and cool him down. If it gets over 103, I'll take him to the ER. I promise. Liam hesitated. He looked at Atlas, who was still whining and pulling at the banister, eyes locked on Finn. Then he looked at Finn. Finn, Liam said softly, I'm so sorry you don't feel good, buddy. Finn leaned into his father's touch, not because he was sick, but because he was starving for affection. The heat of his body was suffocating, the wool itchy against his bruises, but his father's hand felt like the only anchor in a storm. Daddy, Finn croaked. His voice was from dehydration and crying the night before. I know, pal. I know it hurts, Liam soothed, completely misinterpreting the source of the pain. You listen to Bethany, rest, sleep it off. When I get back, you'll be feeling brand new. Liam stood up, conflicted but convinced. He kissed Finn's damp forehead. I love you. He turned to Bethany and kissed her cheek. Thank you. Thank you for taking care of him. I don't know what I'd do without you. Go, Bethany urged gently, handing him the manila folder from the kitchen counter. We'll be fine. Go. Liam grabbed the file. He untied Atlas, who dug his claws into the rug, refusing to move. Let's go, Atlas, Liam snapped, his patience fraying from the stress. He yanked the leash hard. The dog let out a sharp bark, a warning, a plea, but was dragged out the door. Liam took one last look at the hallway. He saw his wife, the picture of capability, standing with her hand on the shoulder of his small, hooded, shivering son. It looked like a tableau of domestic care. He closed the door. The lock clicked. The sound of the truck engine roared to life and faded away down the street. Inside, Bethany removed her hand from Finn's shoulder. She didn't shove him this time. She didn't need to. She just walked over to the thermostat and turned the air conditioning down even lower until the vent rattled. Well, she said, looking at the sweating boy in the winter coat, since you have such a high fever, you probably shouldn't eat today. As they say, starve a fever. She walked into the kitchen and began to eat her avocado toast, leaving Finn standing alone in the hallway, trapped in his layers of heat and silence. The sound of Liam's truck engine faded into the ambient hum of the neighborhood, swallowed by the distance and the chirping of crickets that were already beginning to stir in the shadows of the hedges. To the casual observer, the White House with the blooming azaleas returned to its picture-perfect stillness. But inside, the air pressure seemed to drop, signaling the arrival of a storm that had nothing to do with the weather. Bethany stood in the hallway staring at the closed front door. Her chest heaved, not with exertion, but with the effort of containing a scream of pure frustration. She had been so close. So close. Liam had seen the boy. He had touched him. One wrong move, one slipped sleeve, one whimper from the brat, and her carefully constructed life would have shattered like cheap glass. She turned slowly on her heel. Her eyes found Finn. The boy was still standing where Liam had left him, encased in the thick navy fleece hoodie, sweat trickling down his temples. He looked like a statue of misery, his small body trembling under the weight of the heat and the terror. You, Bethany whispered. The words slid out of her mouth like a snake. You little parasite. She crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides. She didn't strike him. Not yet. She grabbed the hood of the fleece and yanked him forward. Finn stumbled, his socks slipping on the hardwood floor, barely catching himself before he hit the wall. I give you a home, she hissed, leaning down until her nose was inches from his. I give you a mother, and this is how you repay me, by almost getting caught, by letting that stupid mutt sniff you out. Finn shook his head rapidly, tears mingling with the sweat on his face. I didn't mean to. Shut up, Bethany snapped. You smell like fear. That's why the dog went crazy. You provoked him. She grabbed his arm, her fingers digging deep into the muscle right over a fresh bruise. Finn gasped, biting his lip to keep from crying out. Upstairs, she commanded, dragging him toward the staircase. Get out of my sight! You make me sick! They ascended the stairs, a grim procession. Bethany didn't let go of his arm. She marched him down the hallway to his bedroom, the room that was supposed to be a sanctuary, but had become a cell. She shoved him inside. Finn stumbled onto the rug, falling to his knees. Oh, stay there, Bethany ordered. She reached for the door handle. And since you have such a terrible fever, you don't need lunch or dinner. You need to sweat it out. She slammed the door. Click! The sound of the lock turning from the outside was final. Finn sat on the floor staring at the white-painted wood. The room was stifling. Bethany had turned the AC downstairs for herself, but up here the vents were closed, and the afternoon sun was beating against the window. He was still wearing the fleece. He wanted to take it off, but he was afraid. She had put it on him. If he took it off, would she be angry? He goes, curled into a ball on the rug, the heat wrapping around him like a heavy blanket. His throat felt like sandpaper. He hadn't had water since the night before. Miles away, the scenery had changed. The quaint tree-lined streets of Charleston had given way to the monotonous stretch of the interstate highway. Tall pines blurred into a green wall on either side of the road, broken only by the occasional billboard advertising peaches or pecans. Liam drove in silence, his hands gripping the steering wheel at 10 and 2. He tried to focus on the mission ahead, the joint task force training, the protocols, the promotion that could secure Finn's future. But his mind kept drifting back to the hallway, the heat of Finn's skin, the sweat, the way the boy had leaned into him, desperate and heavy. Just the flu, he told himself. Kids get sick fast. Bethany's a good mom. She knows what to do. From the back of the truck, a sound broke his concentration. Scritch, scritch, thump. It was the sound of claws against metal. Liam glanced in the rearview mirror. Through the wire mesh of the partition, he saw Atlas. The German Shepherd was usually a statue of calm during transit, curled up and sleeping until the truck stopped. But today, Atlas was pacing. The crate was large enough for him to stand and turn, and he was doing just that, spinning in tight, agitated circles. Settle down, Atlas, Liam called out, his voice firm. We'll be there in an hour. Atlas ignored him. He let out a sharp, high-pitched bark, a sound that wasn't aggressive but frantic. He stopped pacing and pressed his nose against the mesh, staring at the back of Liam's head. He whined, a long, drawn-out sound that vibrated with anxiety. Liam turned up the radio. Knock it off, buddy. I know you miss him. I miss him too. But the dog didn't stop. Atlas began to paw at the mesh, his claws rattling the metal. He panted heavily, his tongue lolling out, eyes wide and dilated. Liam felt a prickle of unease crawl up his neck. He had raised Atlas from a puppy. He knew every sound this dog made. He knew the "I see a squirrel" bark. He knew the "bad guy is hiding in that bush" growl. He knew the "I found the bomb" sit and stare. He had never seen this. This wasn't separation anxiety. This was alerting. Liam's mind flashed back to a case 3 years ago, a missing girl in the woods. Atlas had acted just like this, spinning, whining, refusing to move forward when they were walking in the wrong direction. The dog had sensed the scent trail on the wind miles before Liam saw a single footprint. Atlas is never wrong. The mantra of the K-9 unit echoed in his head. Liam looked in the mirror again. Atlas locked eyes with him. The dog let out one single deafening bark, then looked back toward the direction they had come from. What are you trying to tell me? Liam whispered. He thought about Finn the hoodie. Why a hoodie in 70J weather? Bethany said he had chills. But when Liam touched him, he was burning up. Not just warm, burning, sweating. Sweat is the body's way of cooling down. Liam's medical training reminded him, if he had the chills, his vessels would constrict. His skin would be dry and cold. Sweating happens when the fever breaks, or when the body is overheating, or when someone is terrified. The image of Finn's eyes flashed in his mind. They weren't just glassy with fever. They were wide, dilated, like Atlas's eyes were right now. Liam's heart skipped a beat. A cold knot formed in his stomach, defying the logic of the situation. Bethany is his mother, he argued with himself. She loves him. Does she? A treacherous voice whispered. Or does she just love you watching her love him? Atlas slammed his body against the side of the crate. Thump, damn it, Liam cursed. He didn't think, he didn't weigh the pros and cons of his career. He listened to the only partner who had never lied to him. Liam grabbed his radio. Dispatch, this is K-91. Go ahead, K-91. The dispatcher's voice crackled. I have a situation, Liam lied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Possible medical emergency at home. I need to abort transit and return to base. I'll contact Captain Miller directly. Copy that, K-91. Liam hit the brakes. He swung the heavy truck into the emergency turnaround lane, gravel spraying as the tires bit into the shoulder. He spun the wheel, pointing the vehicle back towards Charleston. Okay, Atlas, Liam said, his jaw set tight. We're going back. You better be right. In the back, Atlas instantly stopped pacing. He sat down, ears perked forward, watching the road ahead. Back in the house, the silence had stretched into hours. The sun had moved across the sky, turning the light in Finn's room from a bright yellow to a heavy golden orange. The heat in the room was oppressive. Finn had finally taken off the fleece hoodie. He lay on the floor in his t-shirt, his skin sticky and hot. His head pounded with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. His tongue felt like a dry sponge in his mouth. He was so thirsty. He had tried to sleep, but the thirst kept waking him up. It was a primal need overriding everything else. Even the fear of the wooden ruler. He licked his cracked lips. He thought about the garden hose outside. He thought about the condensation on the glass of milk he had spilled yesterday. He couldn't take it anymore. Finn crawled toward the door. His limbs felt heavy, weighed down by dehydration and exhaustion. He reached up and touched the brass doorknob. It was locked, of course. He hesitated. He knew the rules. Silence is golden, but his throat burned. Surely if he just asked for water, she wouldn't be mad. Water was basic. Even prisoners got water. Even dogs got water. Finn raised a small, trembling fist. Knock, knock. The sound was barely audible. He waited. No footsteps. He knocked again, a little harder this time. Thump, thump. Mommy, he called out, his voice a dry rasp. Please, water. Downstairs, Bethany was sitting on the sofa scrolling through Instagram. She had posted a photo earlier, a picture of a homemade chicken soup she had made weeks ago with the caption, "Nursing my little sick munchkin today. Motherhood is messy but beautiful. Sick day, love my stepson." The likes were rolling in. The comments were full of praise. You're a saint, Bethany. He's lucky to have you. Then she heard it. Thump, thump, Bethany froze. Her thumb hovered over a heart icon. She had told him to be quiet. She had told him to sweat it out. Mommy, please. Water. The voice was weak, pathetic, and it was loud enough to ruin her peace. Bethany closed her eyes. A vein in her temple began to throb. The audacity, the sheer disobedience. She had given him a roof over his head, and he couldn't even follow one simple instruction. Be quiet. She set the phone down on the coffee table. She stood up. This wasn't about discipline anymore. This was about dominance. He thought he could make demands. He thought he could disturb her sanctuary. Bethany walked to the kitchen. She opened the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water. The plastic was cold, beaded with condensation. It looked delicious. Then she walked to the dining room and opened the drawer. She took out the teacher. She weighed the hickory ruler in her hand. It felt good, solid. Bethany walked to the stairs. She didn't rush. She climbed each step with a heavy, deliberate thud, letting the sound announce her arrival. She wanted him to hear her coming. She wanted him to know that he had summoned a monster. Upstairs, Finn heard the footsteps. Thump, thump, thump. They weren't the light, quick steps of someone bringing comfort. They were the heavy, rhythmic steps of doom. Finn scrambled back from the door, pressing his back against the bed frame. He pulled his knees to his chest. I'm sorry, he whispered to the empty room. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The footsteps stopped outside his door. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Bethany stood there, framed by the shadows of the hallway. In her left hand, she held the bottle of water. In her right, the ruler hung by her side. You knocked? She asked softly. Finn stared at the water bottle. He couldn't help it. His eyes were glued to it. I'm thirsty, he croaked. Bethany smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. She held the water bottle up. letting the light catch the clear liquid inside. "You're thirsty," she repeated, mocking him. "You're supposed to be sleeping. You're supposed to be silent." She walked toward him. Finn shrank back, making himself as small as possible. "You want water?" Bethany asked, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. She unscrewed the cap. Finn's heart leaped. Was she going to give it to him? Bethany turned her wrist. She poured the water out, not into a glass and not into his mouth. She poured it onto the carpet right in front of his feet. The water soaked into the rug, creating a dark, wet stain. Finn watched, horrified, as his salvation disappeared into the fibers. "Oops," Bethany said, her face blank. She dropped the empty bottle on the bed. Then she raised the ruler. "You want water?" she hissed, stepping closer, the ruler rising high above her head. "I'll give you tears." The empty plastic water bottle hit the far wall with a hollow thack, bouncing once before rolling under the dresser. It was a pathetic sound, insignificant compared to the storm that was gathering in the center of the room. Bethany didn't look at where it landed. Her eyes were fixed on Finn, who was curled up on the rug, staring at the dark, wet stain where the water, his water, was soaking into the fibers. Bethany reached back without looking and turned the lock on the bedroom door. Click. The sound was sharp, mechanical, and final. It sealed the room, transforming it from a child's bedroom into an echo chamber where no one could interfere. The air was thick, smelling of stale heat and the faint chemical scent of the synthetic carpet. "You think you're clever?" Bethany whispered, the hickory ruler tapping rhythmically against her thigh. "Knocking on the door, trying to manipulate me, trying to make me feel guilty." Finn shook his head, pressing his spine against the bed frame until it hurt. "No, I just silence." Bethany's voice cracked like a whip. "Rule number 1, silence. You broke it." She took a step forward. Finn scrambled to the side, trying to put the desk chair between them, but he was slow, his limbs heavy from dehydration and fear. Bethany was faster. She kicked the chair aside. It skittered across the floor and toppled over. "Please, Mommy, Bethany," Finn begged, his voice a dry rasp. "I won't do it again. I promise." "I know you won't," she said coldly, "because I'm going to make sure you remember this for the rest of your miserable life." She didn't wait for him to position himself this time. She didn't wait for him to lie down on the bed or the sofa. She struck while he was scrambling away. A chaotic, unmeasured blow that landed hard across his calf. Crack! The pain was blinding. It wasn't the dull ache of a bruise. It was a sharp, searing line of fire that felt like it had sliced through the muscle. Finn gasped, his mouth opening in a silent "oh," the air seizing in his lungs. "That's for the water," Bethany hissed, raising the ruler again. Crack! The second blow hit his thigh, right over the spot she had struck yesterday. "That's for the dog," she spat. Finn couldn't hold it in. The dam broke. The rule of silence instilled in him through months of psychological terror shattered under the sheer agony of the physical assault. A whimper escaped his lips, quickly escalating into a sob. "It hurts. Stop." "Oh, now you want to talk." Bethany laughed, a breathless, manic sound. She swung again, harder this time, losing the calculated precision she prided herself on. She was no longer disciplining. She was venting. She was pouring every ounce of her frustration, her jealousy of his mother, her hatred of his neediness into the wood. "Crack! Crack! Stop it, Daddy!" Finn screamed. The word ripped out of his throat, raw and desperate. "Daddy, help me!" The mention of Liam's name seemed to snap something inside Bethany. Her eyes went wide, not with fear, but with a pure, unadulterated rage. "He's not here!" she shrieked, swinging the ruler with both hands. "Now he left you. He doesn't care about you. Nobody cares." A quarter of a mile away, a black pickup truck turned onto Oak Avenue. Liam Pierce was a man who understood the power of stealth. He had spent years training dogs to move without sound, to hunt without alerting their prey until it was too late. As he approached his neighborhood, he didn't slam on the keys. He didn't turn on the sirens. He reached down and killed the ignition. The roar of the engine died instantly. The truck, carried by its own momentum, glided forward like a ghost. The tires hummed softly against the asphalt, a low whisper that was easily lost in the ambient noise of the afternoon. Inside the cab, the silence was heavy. Liam gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Beside him in the back, Atlas was no longer pacing. The dog was standing rigid, his nose pressed against the wire mesh. His ears swived forward like radar dishes. He didn't make a sound. He knew the hunt was on. Liam let the truck coast. He passed the neighbors' houses, Mr. Dubois washing his car, Mrs. Patel tending to her petunias. They waved, assuming he was just driving slowly, unaware that the engine was dead, unaware of the dread that was squeezing Liam's heart in a vice. The truck rolled to a stop right in front of his house. It didn't jerk, it simply ceased to move. Liam sat there for a second. The house looked peaceful. The azaleas were vibrant scarlet against the white siding. The afternoon sun glinted off the windows. It was the picture of suburban tranquility. Maybe I'm wrong, Liam thought, a desperate hope flaring in his chest. Maybe Atlas is wrong. Maybe Finn is just sleeping and Bethany is watching TV. He opened the car door. He didn't slam it shut. He pushed it until it clicked, softly, leaving it unlatched. He stepped out onto the driveway. The air was still warm, smelling of pine needles and cut grass. A bird chirped from the cypress tree. Liam took a step toward the porch. He listened. He heard the hum of the refrigerator unit on the side of the house. He heard a distant dog barking blocks away. Then a sound cut through the idyllic afternoon like a serrated knife. It came from the second floor from the window on the left, Finn's room. The window was cracked open just an inch. Bethany had likely opened it earlier to let out the heat she had trapped in there. Or perhaps she had simply forgotten in her rage. Ow, no, please! It was a high-pitched, garbled shriek. It was the sound of an animal in a trap. It was the sound of his son. Liam froze. The blood in his veins seemed to turn to ice, then instantly flash-boiled into steam. Then came the second voice. It wasn't the sweet melodic voice of his wife. It was a guttural, hateful thing he didn't recognize. Scream all you want. Bethany's voice drifted down, clear and sharp through the gap in the window. Scream louder. No one hears you. No one is coming to save a crybaby. Smack. The sound of wood hitting flesh was faint from the street, but to Liam's ears it sounded like a gunshot. The world tilted on its axis. The sky seemed to darken. The bird in the cypress tree stopped singing. Liam didn't think about procedure. He didn't think about probable cause. He didn't think about the fact that he was trembling. No one is coming, Bethany had said. Liam's hand dropped into his belt, checking for keys he already had in his hand. I'm here, he thought, a deadly calm settling over his rage. I'm here. He looked back at the truck. Atlas was watching him through the window, vibrating with potential energy. Liam gave a single sharp hand signal, a flat palm chopping downward. Wait! Liam turned back to the house. He didn't run. Running made noise. Running gave the enemy time to prepare. He moved with the terrifying purpose of a predator entering its own territory to kill an intruder. He walked up the driveway, past the blooming azaleas that masked the rod inside, and stepped onto the porch. Above him, the crying continued, a jagged, broken sound that tore Liam's soul apart with every sob. Daddy! Finn wailed again, his voice cracking. Liam stood at the front door. He inserted the key into the lock. His hand was steady now. The rage had focused into a single point of absolute clarity. He wasn't just a police officer anymore. He wasn't just a husband. He was a father, and the monster was upstairs. The brass key felt heavy in Liam's hand, heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. His fingers, usually steady enough to thread a needle or calm a trembling victim, were vibrating with a fine, uncontrollable tremor. It wasn't fear, it was the adrenaline of a father who realizes he has left his lamb in the den of a wolf. Liam stood on the porch, the afternoon sun warming the back of his neck, a cruel reminder of the normally that existed just inches away. He took a deep breath, forcing the air into his lungs, forcing his heart rate to slow down. He couldn't burst in like a bull. If he kicked the door, the wood would splinter. The noise would echo like a gunshot, and Bethany, cunning, manipulative Bethany, would have 3 seconds. 3 seconds was enough time to drop the ruler. 3 seconds was enough to cover Finn with a blanket. 3 seconds was enough to compose her face into a mask of innocent confusion. Liam needed to rob her of those 3 seconds. He needed to catch the devil before she could put her halo back on. He looked down at Atlas. The German Shepherd was vibrating with kinetic energy, his muscles coiled tight beneath his black and tan coat. Atlas's eyes were fixed on the door, his ears swiveled forward, capturing sounds that Liam couldn't yet hear. The dog let out a low, soft whine, the sound of a creature desperate to protect its pack. Liam crouched slightly and made eye contact with his partner. He raised his right hand, flat and horizontal, and then lowered it slowly, palm down. The signal, it was a command reserved for high-risk tactical entries, used when silence was the difference between life and death. Stealth, hunt, silent approach. Atlas understood instantly. The transformation was profound. The anxious, whining family pet vanished. In his place stood a predator. Atlas's mouth closed, silencing his panting, his ears pinned back slightly, streamlining his silhouette. He lowered his center of gravity, his belly hovering inches from the porch floor. He didn't look like a dog anymore. He looked like a shadow detached from the wall, a phantom made of fur and muscle. Liam turned back to the door. He gripped the key tight, aiming for the lock. He inserted the metal tip. He didn't shove it. He slid it in, feeling the ridges engage with the tumblers. He applied pressure, turning his wrist with the slow, deliberate motion of a safe cracker. Click. The sound was infinite decimal. It was quieter than the chirp of the sparrow in the cypress tree behind them. It was the sound of a lock yielding, the sound of a secret being exposed. To Liam, it sounded like the hammer of a gun being cocked. He turned the handle. The well-oiled mechanism turned without a squeak, a testament to Bethany's obsession with home maintenance, a detail that would now be her undoing. Liam pushed the door open just enough to slip through. Atlas flowed in first, silent as smoke, his paws making no sound on the hardwood floor of the entryway. Liam followed, closing the door behind him until the latch caught with a soft snick. They were inside. The house was cool, the air conditioner humming with a low white noise that usually masked the sounds of living. The air smelled of lemon pledge and lavender, the scent of a clean, happy home. It was a lie. The smell made Liam nauseous. Liam stood at the bottom of the stairs, his back pressed against the wall. Atlas was already 3 steps up, his body low, freezing in place as he waited for Liam. The silence of the ground floor was a stark, violent contrast to the noise coming from the second floor. Without the barrier of the exterior walls and the glass windows, the sounds were raw. They were unmuted. They tore through the ceiling and rained down on Liam like shrapnel. Whish thwack, the sound of wood striking flesh. It was distinct. It was sickening. Please, no more. Finn's voice was barely a voice anymore. It was a broken, gargling sob, the sound of a child who has cried until his throat is raw. A child who has abandoned hope of rescue and is begging only for the pain to stop. You want water? Bethany's voice drifted down the stairs. It wasn't the screaming voice Liam had heard from the yard. It was worse. It was calm. It was conversational. Terrifyingly casual, as if she were discussing the weather while she tortured a child. Look at the rug, Finn. Look at the mess you made. You wasted it. Wish thwack. You ungrateful little brat. She continued, the exertion of the swing evident in her breath. Your father isn't here to save you. He's halfway to the county line. He's probably laughing about how gullible you are. Liam closed his eyes for a split second. The guilt hit him like a physical blow to the gut. He had walked out that door. He had handed her the weapon. He had kissed the monster and told his son to obey her. He left you. He doesn't care. Bethany's words were poisoning Finn's soul. Even as she broke his body, Liam opened his eyes. The guilt evaporated, burned away by a cold, white-hot fury. He wasn't Liam the husband anymore. He wasn't Liam the peacemaker. He was Judgment Day, and he was walking up the stairs. He signaled Atlas again. Advance. They moved as one unit. Liam knew every creak of this staircase. He knew the third step groaned if you stepped in the middle, so he stepped on the edge. He knew the banister rattled if you grabbed it too hard, so he didn't touch it. He moved with the deadly grace of a man who hunted criminals for a living. His heavy boots made no sound. His breathing was controlled, silent. Thump, Bethany, taking a step upstairs. Get up, Bethany commanded. Don't you dare curl up on me. Take it like a man. You want to be a man like your father? Then stand up. Liam reached the landing. Atlas was right beside him, his lips pulled back in a silent snarl, revealing teeth that were ready to tear. The dog was vibrating, his restraint hanging by a thread, waiting for the command to unleash. Hell. The door to Finn's room was straight ahead. It was closed. Liam stared at the white-painted wood. Behind that thin barrier, his world was burning. He crept closer. 5T, 3T. He could hear Bethany's breathing now. He could hear the soft, wet sniffing of his son, trying to hold back tears to avoid punishment. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Bethany said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried through the wood. "Who do you love?" There was a silence broken only by a small, terrified hiccup. I I love you, Mommy Bethany," Finn whispered, the lie squeezed out of him by pain. "Liar," she hissed. "You don't mean it. Wish." Liam didn't wait for the thack. He didn't need to hear anymore. He had heard the confession. He had heard the crime. The trial was over. Liam stopped in front of the door. He didn't reach for the knob. He shifted his weight, planting his back foot firmly on the carpet of the hallway. He tightened every muscle in his body, channeling the rage of a father and the power of the law into his shoulder. He looked down at Atlas. The dog looked up, his eyes burning with yellow fire. Liam nodded once. It was time to bring the roof down. The white-painted door stood between Liam Pierce and the end of his world. It was a flimsy barrier, really, hollow core wood, standard suburban construction. But in that moment, it felt like the heavy iron gates of a fortress. Inside, the rhythmic thack of the hickory ruler had stopped, replaced by a heavy, panting silence that was somehow worse. Liam tried the handle, locked. He reached for his keys again, but his hand froze. A key was too slow. A key was polite. A key implied that he was entering a room where the rules of civilization still applied. But what he had heard through that crack in the window, the animalistic cruelty, the breaking of a child's spirit, told him that civilization had abandoned this room a long time ago. He didn't look at Atlas. He didn't need to. He could feel the dog beside him, a coiled spring of righteous violence, waiting for the dam to break. Liam took a step back, planting his heavy boot firmly on the hallway carpet. He drew a breath that tasted of ozone and fury. He dropped his shoulder, angling his body like a battering ram. He didn't think about the structural damage. He didn't think about the noise. He thought only of the small, terrified voice that had whispered, "I love you, Mommy Bethany." Liam launched himself forward. Crack! Boom! The sound was explosive. The wood around the strike plate shattered like balsa. The door didn't just open. It flew inward, torn violently from its frame, slamming against the interior wall with a deafening crash that shook the dust from the ceiling. Liam stumbled into the room, his momentum carrying him forward, Atlas flowing around his legs like a stream of black oil. Time, as it often does in moments of supreme trauma, ground to a halt. The scene before Liam froze into a tableau, a grotesque painting of domestic horror that would be burned onto the backs of his retinas until the day he died. The room was sweltering, smelling of sour sweat and stale fear. In the center of the room stood Bethany. She was frozen in mid-motion, her arm raised high above her head. In her hand, the vintage hickory ruler caught the afternoon sun, gleaming like a perverse scepter. Her face was a mask of exertion and unholy glee, her cheeks flushed a deep, ugly crimson, her hair escaping its perfect shiny and wild wisps. She looked like a demon caught in the act of worship. And below her, Liam's knees almost buckled. Finn was lying on the bed. He wasn't crying anymore. He was curled into a tight defensive ball, his face buried in the mattress. The oversized navy hoodie had been yanked up, bunched around his neck to expose his back for the punishment. It wasn't a back anymore. It was a battlefield. The skin of Liam's 5-year-old son was a ruin. It was a crisscrossing map of agony. There were old bruises, yellow and green, fading like old storms. Over those were fresh purple welts, raised and swollen, looking like angry earthworms burrowing under the skin. And over those, the newest barrel strikes had broken the capillaries, leaving streaks of bright red blood that wept onto the sheets. It was a tapestry of pain woven onto the canvas of an innocent child. For a heartbeat, there was no sound. Bethany stared at the shattered door, at the husband she thought was miles away. Her eyes went wide, the pupils shrinking to pinpricks. The ruler slipped from her nerveless fingers. Clack! It hit the floorboards. The sound broke the spell. Liam, she whispered, the word trembling on her lips, devoid of its usual manipulation. It was the sound of a predator realizing it had just become prey. But Liam didn't move. He couldn't. He was paralyzed by a grief so profound it felt like he was drowning. Atlas was not paralyzed. The German shepherd didn't bark. He didn't warn. He launched. He was a blur of black and tan, a heat-seeking missile made of muscle and fury. He crossed the room in a single bound, bypassing the bed, bypassing the boy he desperately wanted to comfort, because the threat was still standing. Bethany screamed, a short, sharp sound that was cut off abruptly. Atlas hit her center mass. The force of the 80-pound dog lifted her off her feet. She flew backwards, slamming hard against the wall between the dresser and the window. Before she could slide down, Atlas was there. He didn't bite her face. He didn't tear her throat out, though. Every instinct in his ancient wolf brain screamed for him to do it. He was a K-9. He was disciplined. He planted his massive front paws squarely on her shoulders, pinning her to the drywall. He shoved his face inches from hers, his lips peeling back to reveal gleaming white fangs that dripped with saliva. The growl that emerged from Atlas was subterranean. It was the sound of tectonic plates grinding together. It vibrated through Bethany's chest, rattling her ribs. Atlas held her there, his hot breath washing over her face, his eyes burning with a yellow hellish light. He dared her to move. He dared her to breathe wrong. Bethany squeezed her eyes shut, whimpering, her hands pinned to her sides, utterly dominated by the creature she had kicked only hours before. Liam finally moved. He walked into the room. He didn't run to Finn, not yet. He couldn't comfort his son. While the source of the pain was still breathing the same air, he stepped over the fallen ruler. He stepped over the wet stain on the rug where the water had been poured. He walked toward the wall where his wife held his wife hostage. Liam Pierce was a large man. In his uniform, he was imposing, but now, stripping away the badge, stripping away the rules of engagement, he was terrifying. His face was devoid of color. His eyes were dark voids, black holes that swallowed all light and mercy. There was no shouting, no frenzied screaming, just a cold, absolute silence that was louder than any gunshot. He reached Atlas and Bethany. Off, Liam whispered to the dog. Atlas hesitated, his growl deepening, wanting to finish it. Off, Liam repeated, his voice cracking like ice. Atlas dropped to all fours, backing away slowly, but keeping his eyes locked on Bethany's throat, ready to strike if Liam gave the signal. Bethany slid down the wall slightly, gasping for air, her eyes flying open. She looked at Liam, attempting to summon the mask one last time. "Liam, baby," she stammered, tears streaming down her face, her hands reaching out. It's not what it looks like. He was out of control. I had to." Liam didn't let her finish. He reached out. His hand, barged and calloused, grabbed the silk collar of her blouse. He didn't hit her. He didn't need to. He clenched his fist, twisting the fabric tight against her neck. With a surge of strength, fueled by pure adrenaline, Liam lifted her. He hauled her up the wall until her toes were barely scraping the floorboards. He slammed her back against the drywall again. Thud. Pictures rattled on the walls. Bethany gasped, clawing uselessly at his wrist. She looked into his eyes and saw her own reflection, tiny and terrified. She looked for the husband who had kissed her goodbye that morning. He was gone. In his place was a stranger, a man who had seen the depths of hell and realized she was the devil who built it. Liam leaned in close. His face was inches from hers. He could smell her expensive perfume, now mixed with the sour stench of her own terror. It sickened him. He spoke, his voice a low, guttural rumble that seemed to come from the center of the earth. He spaced out every word, delivering them like individual sentences of death. "Don't," he tightened his grip. "Ever." Bethany choked, her eyes bulging. "Touch." Liam's other hand came up, pointing a trembling finger at the small, broken figure on the bed behind them. "My son." Liam leaned closer until his forehead was almost touching hers, his eyes burning with a promise of violence that no badge could restrain. Again. He held her there for a second longer, letting the message sink into her marrow. letting her feel the weight of his hatred. Then, with a look of utter disgust, he released her. Bethany crumbled to the floor, coughing and sobbing, a heap of ruined elegance. Liam turned his back on her. She didn't exist anymore. He looked at the bed. The red rage faded from his vision, replaced by a blurring wall of tears. He took a step toward his son, his heart breaking into a million jagged pieces. The room was silent, save for the ragged breathing of the woman on the floor and the soft, terrified whimpering from the bed. Liam stood over Bethany, his chest heaving, the adrenaline slowly receding to reveal a cold, hard landscape of resolve. He reached to his belt, his hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of restraining the violence that wanted to explode from his fists. He unclipped his handcuffs. The metal was cool and heavy. "Turn around," Liam ordered. His voice was flat, devoid of the warmth that usually defined him. It was the voice of the law. Bethany looked up at him, her mascara smeared, her face blotchy. She tried to scramble backward, pushing herself against the dresser. "Liam, please. You're overreacting. It was just a spanking. Every parent does it. You can't turn around." Liam didn't wait. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it behind her back with practiced efficiency. She cried out, more in shock than pain, as the steel cuff ratcheted shut around her left wrist. He grabbed the other hand, forcing it back. Click, click, click. The sound was sharp and final. Bethany Seo, the woman who had charmed his friends, the woman who had promised to love his son, was now a prisoner in the home she had turned into a torture chamber. Liam hauled her to her feet and marched her to the vanity chair in the corner. He pushed her down. "Sit," he commanded, "and if you say one word, one single word, I will gag you." He turned away, pulling his radio from his belt. His thumb pressed the button. "Dispatch, this is K-91, he said, his voice cracking slightly before he steadied it. "I need immediate backup at my 1020. I also need a paramedic unit." "Code 3, copy K-91. What is the nature of the emergency?" Liam looked at the bed. He looked at the blood on the sheets. He looked at the wooden ruler lying on the floor. "Child abuse," Liam whispered, the words tasting like ash. "Suspect in custody. Victim requires immediate transport." There was a pause on the radio, then a solemn, "Copy that, Liam. Help is rolling." Liam clipped the radio back. He took a deep breath, wiping a hand over his face, trying to scrub away the image of the monster he had just handcuffed. He had to change now. He had to stop being the officer and start being the father. He turned toward the bed. Finn was curled into a ball so tight he looked like he was trying to disappear. His hands were clamped over his ears, his eyes squeezed shut. He was shaking violently, the vibrations rattling the headboard. Liam walked over slowly. He made his footsteps heavy so Finn would hear him coming, so he wouldn't startle him. He knelt by the bed, ignoring the pain in his own knees. "Finn," Liam whispered. Finn flinched as if he had been struck. He curled tighter, pulling his knees up to his chin. "I'm sorry." Finn sobbed into the mattress, his voice muffled. "I'm sorry I screamed. I'm sorry I asked for water. I'll be silent. I promise." The apology shattered Liam's heart into dust. His son was apologizing for his own torture. He was apologizing for being alive. "No, no, no," Liam murmured, tears finally spilling over his cheeks hot and fast. "You don't have to be silent, buddy. Never again." Liam reached out to touch Finn's shoulder, but he hesitated. He was afraid. He was afraid that his touch, the touch of a man who had brought this monster into their house, would burn. But he had to try. He laid his hand gently on Finn's head, stroking the damp, sweaty hair. "Don't hit me," Finn whimpered, cringing away. "I will never hit you," Liam choked out. "Look at me, Finn. It's Daddy." Finn didn't move. He was trapped in the loop of his trauma. Then a wet, cold nose nudged Finn's elbow. Atlas had left his post guarding Bethany. The dog sensed the shift in the room. The threat was neutralized. The pack needed healing. Atlas hopped his front paws onto the mattress. The bed dipped under his weight. He whined softly, a low, rumbling sound of pure affection. He pushed his snout into the crook of Finn's neck, right where the tears were pooling, and began to lick. Slurp, slurp. The rough tongue scraped against Finn's skin. It was grounding. It was real. Finn gasped, his eyes flying open. He saw the black and tan fur. He saw the soulful brown eyes of the D. Atlas, Finn breathed him to. Yeah, buddy, Liam said, moving closer, his voice thick with emotion. Atlas is here. Daddy is here. The bad things are over. Finn slowly uncurled. He turned his head and saw his father kneeling on the floor, crying. He had never seen his father cry. It was terrifying, yet strangely comforting. It meant that what happened was real. It meant that it mattered. Daddy? Finn reached out a trembling hand. Liam caught it. He kissed the small, bruised knuckles. I'm here. I'm so sorry I left you. I'm so sorry. Finn launched himself. He didn't care about the pain in his back. He threw his arms around Liam's neck, burying his face in his father's chest. He wailed as a loud, ugly, beautiful sound of release. Liam wrapped his massive arms around the boy, holding him together, rocking him back and forth as the sirens began to wail in the distance, getting louder and louder. 10 minutes later, the house was swarming. Captain Miller, a gray-haired veteran with a face carved from granite and eyes that had seen too much, stood in the doorway of the bedroom. He looked at the broken door. He looked at the ruler bagged as evidence. He looked at Bethany, who was sitting in the chair, staring blankly at the wall. Miller didn't say a word to her. He just nodded to the two uniformed officers behind him. Get her out of here, Miller growled, and watch her head. We don't want her bruising before the mugshot. The officers hauled Bethany up. She didn't fight. The reality of her situation had finally crashed down on her. As they led her out into the hallway, past the room where she had reigned as a tyrant, she looked small and pathetic. Outside, the neighborhood had gathered. Mrs. Patel was there clutching her pearls. Mr. Dubois had stopped washing his car. They watched in stunned silence as the beautiful, perfect Bethany Sampio was let out in handcuffs, her head bowed, not in remorse, but in shame. The illusion of the azalea-covered cottage was shattered forever. Inside the bedroom, the paramedics were finishing their assessment. His vitals are stable, but he's severely dehydrated, the medic said softly to Liam. And those wounds, they need to be treated at the hospital. Infection risk is high. Liam nodded. I'm taking him. We have the gurney, the medic offered. No, Liam said, standing up. I've got him. Liam leaned down and scooped Finn up into his arms. He was careful not to touch the boy's back, cradling him against his chest. Finn was so light, too light. Liam wrapped a soft blanket around him, shielding him from the world. Ready to go, champ, Liam whispered. Finn nodded against his chest, his thumb finding its way to his mouth, a habit he had stopped years ago, but needed now. Liam walked out of the room. He walked past the broken door. He walked down the stairs, his boots heavy and sure. Atlas trotted right beside him, his flank brushing against Liam's leg, his head held high. The dog was still on duty. They stepped out onto the porch. The sun was beginning to set, bathing Charleston in a warm, honey-colored glow. The air was cooling down, the humidity breaking. It was the golden hour, the time of day when the world looks softest. Liam didn't stop for the neighbors. He didn't stop for the captain. He walked straight toward the waiting ambulance, its back doors open like a sanctuary. He sat on the edge of the stretcher, still holding Finn. He didn't want to let go. Finn looked up. The sunlight hit his face, making him squint. He looked at the crowd, then at the police cars, then at his father. Daddy, Finn whispered, are you going away again? The question hit Liam harder than any bullet. Liam reached up to his chest. His fingers fumbled with the pin of his badge. The gold shield he had worked his whole life to earn. He unpinned the end. It felt heavy and warm in his hand. He took Finn's small hand and pressed the badge into it. Then he closed Finn's fingers over the cold metal. You hold on to this, Liam said, his voice fierce and steady. This badge means I protect people. But from now on, you are the only person I need to protect. I'm not going anywhere, Finn. I promise. I will never leave you behind again. Finn looked at the shiny gold star in his hand. He traced the letters. Sergeant. He looked at Atlas, who had jumped into the back of the ambulance, and laid his head on Liam's knee, looking up at Finn with adoring eyes. For the first time in months, the knot in Finn's stomach loosened. The fear that lived in his throat receded, pushed back by the weight of the badge and the warmth of his father's arms. Okay, Finn whispered. He closed his eyes, leaning his head back against Liam's shoulder. As the ambulance doors closed, shutting out the gawking neighbors in the house of horrors, Finn didn't see the darkness. He felt the vibration of the engine, the fur of his dog, and the heartbeat of his father. He was safe. And in the quiet safety of that moment, surrounded by the two heroes who had broken down the door for him, Finn finally truly slept. This story reminds us that sometimes the hardest truths are hidden behind the most beautiful doors. We live in a world where appearances can be deceiving, where a perfect smile can hide cruelty, and where silence is often a cry for help. Liam's journey teaches us that love is not just about providing a house or food. It is about paying attention. It is about trusting that deep instinct, that God-given intuition that tells us when something is wrong. It teaches us that true heroes are those who are willing to turn the car around, to listen to the voiceless, and to break down any barrier to protect the innocent. Let us be more like Liam and Atlas, vigilant, loyal, and brave enough to face the darkness, to bring our loved ones back into the light. Heavenly Father, we come before you today with grateful hearts. We ask you to place a hedge of protection around our children and our grandchildren. Give us the eyes to see the pain that others try to hide and the courage to step in when we are needed. Lord, we pray for every child who feels alone or afraid today. Let them know they are seen, they are loved, and they are precious in your sight. Heal the brokenhearted and bind up their wounds. If you believe that God watches over the innocent and protects our families, please write Amen in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with a friend. You never know who needs this reminder today. And please subscribe to Ebon Stories for more stories of hope, faith, and redemption. Until next time, may God bless you and keep you.